All right, so get ready because we are diving deep today into something pretty intense.
Intense in a good way,
Oh,
hopefully.
absolutely.
Okay.
It's this thing called the NSN workshop. And let me tell you, after spending hours going through notes and presentations from the first 8 sessions of this thing,
Oh, wow.
I'm hooked. It's provocative, it's challenging, it's like nothing I've ever encountered before in the self-help world.
So NSN stands for 9 Steps to Nothing. And I know that sounds a little ominous, maybe even a little scary for some people, but it's actually incredibly liberating once you start to understand the philosophy behind it.
Okay, so 9 steps to nothing. Now, I think a lot of people hearing that are going to think, wait, what? Nothing. Why would I want to go to nothing? Right. Like we're all so focused on achieving something, on being somebody. But what if all that striving is actually the thing that's keeping us stuck? What if it's the source of our unhappiness?
That's exactly what NSN is getting at. They're not afraid to ask the tough questions, to challenge our assumptions about what it means to live a good life. They start by acknowledging the pain points, the sense of emptiness that so many of us feel in this modern world. We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to be ourselves, to follow our dreams, to achieve success.
And yet so many people are still feeling lost, unfulfilled. There's this void that can't be filled with more stuff, more achievement.
It's like we're all on this treadmill, running and running, but never really getting anywhere. And NSN is saying, hey, maybe it's time to step off the treadmill. What if all those messages about being yourself and following your dreams are actually keeping you trapped? What if they're just another form of social conditioning?
Okay, so that's like a pretty radical idea, right? Don't be yourself. Don't follow your dream. Like that goes against everything we've been taught, but it's also kind of intriguing, don't you think?
It is. It's definitely provocative. And they back it up with some serious philosophical weight. They introduce Kierkegaard's concept of the mass man, which is basically someone who defines themselves by what everyone else is doing, mimicking without ever really digging deep into their own values and desires.
So they're saying that even when we think we're being ourselves, we might actually just be conforming to what society expects of us. We're not really free. We're just playing a role.
Exactly. And that role might be the doctor, the lawyer, the entrepreneur. The point is, it's a role that's been defined by someone else, not by you. And it makes you wonder, what would happen if we actually stripped away all those roles, all those expectations? Who would we be then?
That's a pretty deep question. And I think that's what makes NSN so compelling. It's not offering easy answers or quick fixes. It's an invitation to embark on a journey of self-discovery, a journey that might take you to some pretty unexpected places.
Yeah, and it starts with this idea of unlearning, of letting go of all the stuff we've been told about who we are and what we should be doing with our lives. It's about questioning everything, stripping away those layers of conditioning to get to the core of what truly matters.
Right, because how can you discover who you really are if you're clinging to all these preconceived notions of who you're supposed to be? It's like trying to see the world through a dirty window. You need to clean the glass first to get a clear view.
Absolutely. What pops into your head when I say the word summer?
Summer. Okay, well, let's see. Beaches, sunshine, the smell of sunscreen, road trips with the windows down.
Exactly. We all have these mental frameworks based on our experiences.
Right.
Like those images and feelings that came up for you when I said summer, that's your schema for summer.
Okay, so it's like a mental shortcut, a way of organizing information based on our past experiences.
Right. But NSN takes it a step further with self-schema. So we're not just seeing the world as it is, we're seeing it through the lens of our own personal history, all those experiences that have shaped our beliefs about ourselves.
Okay, so that makes sense. But how do those self-schemas actually work? Can you give me an example?
Sure. So let's say you have a self-schema, that you're an introvert, that you're shy and uncomfortable in social situations. Now, every time you're in a social situation, that schema is going to be activated. You might start to feel anxious. You might avoid eye contact. You might not speak up even when you have something to say. And because you're behaving in a way that confirms your belief, that belief becomes even stronger. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow, so it's like we're trapped in this feedback loop, constantly reinforcing those old beliefs, even when they might be limiting us.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Those self-schemas can be so deeply ingrained that we're not even aware of them. They're operating on an unconscious level, shaping our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without us even realizing it.
So how do we even begin to challenge those schemas, those beliefs that are so deeply embedded in our psyche?
Well, that's where NSN gets really interesting. They start by introducing this idea that the self, the I, that we think we are, is actually just a construct, a story that we've created based on our experiences. They draw on some pretty heavy philosophical ideas here, like Locke's concept of personal identity and Hume's bundle theory.
Okay, so bear with me here. Because I know philosophy can get a little dense, but basically they're saying that there's no solid, unchanging self.
Yeah.
That we're constantly evolving, changing, becoming.
Exactly. And that can be a pretty unsettling thought for some people because we're so attached to this idea of who we are, to our sense of self. But what if that sense of self is actually an illusion? What if it's just a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the world?
Okay, I can see how that could be unsettling. But it's also kind of exciting, right? Because if the self is just a story, then maybe we can rewrite that story. Maybe we can become someone new, someone better.
Exactly. And that's the potential that NSN offers. It's not about becoming perfect or achieving some ultimate state of enlightenment. It's about embracing the journey, the process of self-discovery. And that journey begins with questioning everything, with letting go of the stories that no longer serve us.
It's like clearing out the clutter, both mentally and emotionally, to make space for something new to emerge.
Right, and they don't sugarcoat it. They even talk about facing the abyss, the potential meaninglessness of existence. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. But NSN uses Nietzsche's ideas to challenge our assumptions about morality, about meaning, about the very foundation of our beliefs. They're saying, hey, what if there is no inherent meaning? What if we're truly free to create our own meaning?
Okay, so instead of freaking out about the meaninglessness, we can choose to create our own meaning. I'm starting to see how this workshop goes way beyond your typical self-improvement fluff.
It does, and it's not about offering easy answers or quick fixes. It's a deep dive, a radical exploration of the self. And that exploration requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Right, because the truth is, we're all a bit messy, a bit broken, a bit lost. But that's okay. That's what makes us human. And it's in those imperfections, in those cracks and crevices, that we find our true beauty.
Absolutely, and that's the message that NSN is trying to convey. It's not about fixing yourself or becoming someone you're not. It's about embracing your wholeness, your shadow, and your light, and creating a life that is truly authentic and meaningful.
It's about saying yes to the journey, to the unknown, to the possibility of becoming something more than you ever thought possible.
And that's a journey worth taking, don't you think?
Absolutely. So we've talked about like the big ideas behind the NSN workshop, this whole idea of unlearning and dismantling the self. But I'm curious about the actual, nuts and bolts. How do they actually help people do this? What are the tools and techniques they use?
Yeah, well, one thing that really stood out to me was how they use art and cinema to explore these complex philosophical ideas. For example, in one of the early sessions, they have participants watch a series of films like The Matrix, Zelig, and Fight Club.
Oh, wow. Those are some pretty intense films.
They are, but they're also incredibly thought-provoking. And they all deal with these themes of identity, perception, and the nature of reality.
Okay, so it's not just about watching movies for entertainment. It's about using them as a way to engage with these big questions, to see them reflected back at us in a different way.
Right. And it's interesting because those films are all very different, but they all kind of point to the same thing, which is that the reality we perceive is not necessarily the truth. It's a construct, a story that we've created based on our experiences and beliefs.
And that ties back to what we were talking about earlier with schema, right? How our past experiences shape our perception of the world.
Exactly. And NSN takes it a step further by introducing the concept of the cycle of experience, which is basically a map of how we move through the world, how we engage with our needs and desires.
So it's not just about understanding our experiences, but also about identifying where we get stuck in that cycle, where those old patterns and schemas take over.
Right. And they highlight these three main problems that can arise in the cycle of experience. Lack of awareness, unfinished business from the past, and not taking responsibility for our choices.
Okay, so lack of awareness, meaning we're not even conscious of what's driving our behavior.
Right. It's like we're on autopilot, reacting to situations based on these unconscious patterns and beliefs. And then unfinished business, well, that's all the stuff we're carrying around from the past, the unresolved emotional wounds, the traumas, the things that we haven't fully processed or let go of.
And then not taking responsibility for our choices.
Yeah.
I guess that means blaming others for our circumstances, feeling like a victim of our own lives.
Exactly. And all of these things can keep us stuck in this cycle of suffering, this loop of repeating the same patterns over and over again.
It's like we're walking around with this invisible backpack full of rocks, weighing us down.
Yeah.
And we don't even realize it's there.
That's a great analogy. And NSN is saying, hey, let's unpack that backpack. Let's see what's in there. And maybe, just maybe, we can start letting go of some of those rocks.
Okay, so I'm all for lightening the load.
Yeah.
But how do they actually help you do that? Do they give you a step-by-step guide or something?
Well, they use a variety of tools and techniques, some of which we've already talked about, like the films, the exploration of schema, and they also delve into the psychology of the self, the hidden forces that shape our behavior. And NSN uses his ideas to help participants understand their own defense mechanisms, the ways they try to protect themselves from uncomfortable emotions or thoughts.
Right, because sometimes those defense mechanisms, even though they're meant to protect us, can actually end up keeping us stuck.
Exactly. Like if you're constantly repressing your anger, it's going to find a way to express itself, maybe in passive-aggressive behavior or even physical symptoms.
So it's about becoming aware of those defenses, understanding how they work, and maybe even finding healthier ways to cope with those difficult emotions.
Exactly. It's about simplifying your life, focusing on what truly matters, letting go of the excess both physically and mentally.
Okay, so it's about getting rid of the clutter that's weighing you down, the distractions that are keeping you from seeing what's really important.
Exactly. And they talk about how our culture encourages us to accumulate more and more, whether it's possessions, experiences, or even relationships. And all of that stuff just creates more noise, more distraction, more clutter. It's like we're drowning in stuff, but still feeling empty inside. And they connect this to the rise of narcissism, which they see as a symptom of this culture of consumption and self-obsession.
Narcissism, but isn't that just a personality disorder?
They see it as more than that. They see it as a cultural phenomenon, this idea that we're all special, unique, entitled. And it leads to this constant need for validation, this inability to empathize with others, this sense of entitlement.
It's like we're all becoming little emperors, demanding that the world revolve around us.
Exactly. And that's not a recipe for happiness or fulfillment. It actually leads to more isolation, more loneliness, more suffering.
So how do we get back to a place of genuine connection and empathy?
Well, NSN suggests that it starts with self-awareness, with understanding the root of those narcissistic tendencies. It's about shifting your focus inward, away from the external world and all its distractions. And that's where the real work of transformation can begin, when we start to shine a light on those dark corners, those shadow aspects that we've been trying to hide from ourselves and from the world.
So it's not about getting rid of the shadow, but about integrating it, accepting it as part of who we are.
Exactly. And that's where the real healing can begin. Because when we stop fighting against ourselves, when we embrace our wholeness, we open up to a whole new level of freedom and possibility.
And that's ultimately what NSN is all about, right? Freedom from the limitations of the past, freedom from the stories that no longer serve us, freedom to create a life that is truly authentic and meaningful.
Absolutely. And they also talk about the importance of taking responsibility for our choices, for the ways we've contributed to our own suffering.
Right, because it's easy to blame others for our circumstances, but ultimately, we're the ones who are in control of our lives.
And that can be a scary thought for some people, but it's also incredibly empowering because it means that we have the power to change, to create a different reality for ourselves.
Yeah, it's like taking ownership of your life, stepping into your power.
Right. It's about acknowledging the impermanence of everything, the fact that our time here is limited, and that can be a really powerful motivator to start living more intentionally, to make the most of every moment.
It's like a reminder to not waste your time on things that don't matter, to focus on what brings you joy, to live a life that you're proud of. So it's not about finding the right answer, but about the journey, the process of inquiry.
Right. And they also use art to explore these ideas, bringing in paintings like René Magritte's The Lovers the Second, which depicts two figures with their heads covered in cloth, kissing.
I love Magritte. His work is so surreal, so thought-provoking. But what does that painting have to do with covens or self-discovery?
Well, it's about the masks we wear, the ways we hide ourselves from each other, even in the closest relationships.
It's like we're all afraid to show our true selves, to be vulnerable, to be seen.
Right. And NSN is saying, hey, let's take off those masks. Let's be authentic. Let's be real. Let's connect with each other on a deeper level.
Okay, but that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Right? How do you just take off those masks, especially when you've been wearing them for so long?
That's the work. And it's not easy, but it's possible. And NSN provides the tools and the support to help you do it.
So from schema to narcissism, from classical music to koans, from Freud to Magritte, it sounds like they're really covering a lot of ground.
They are.
Yeah.
And it's all interconnected. It all points back to this one central idea, which is that the self is a construct, a story that we've created. And if we can become aware of that story, if we can start to question it, to challenge it, to rewrite it, then we can create a whole new reality for ourselves.
A reality that is more authentic, more meaningful, more aligned with who we truly are.
Exactly. And that's the journey that NSN invites us to embark on.
After exploring all these tools and techniques that NSN uses, my mind is officially blown. Like, this is some next-level self-discovery stuff.
It is, isn't it? And we're not even done yet, because those stories, those narratives we create to make sense of the world, they often crumble in the face of tragedy, in the face of the absurd. And that can be a really terrifying experience, but it can also be incredibly liberating.
Liberating. How so?
Because it forces us to confront the truth that there is no inherent meaning, that we're free to create our own meaning. And that's a scary thought, but it's also incredibly empowering.
So instead of trying to make sense of the chaos, we can embrace it. We can find beauty in the absurdity. So it's not about denying the darkness, but about finding a way to live with it, to even embrace it as part of the human experience.
Absolutely. And NSN takes this a step further by challenging us to not just accept the absurdity, but to actually defy it.
Defy it. How do you defy the meaninglessness of existence?
By creating your own meaning, by choosing to live a life that is authentic, that is aligned with your values, that is filled with purpose and passion.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's easier said than done, right? Like, how do you actually do that?
Well, that's where the real work begins, the work of self-discovery. And NSN provides a framework for doing that work, a set of tools and techniques that can help you unpack your baggage, confront your fears, and step into your power.
So it's not just about understanding these big philosophical concepts. It's about applying them to your own life, making them real, making them practical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes courage, it takes commitment, it takes a willingness to be vulnerable, but the rewards are immeasurable.
Where do you go from there?
Well, that's when the real magic happens. That's when you start to experience a sense of freedom, a sense of purpose, a sense of peace that you never thought possible.
It's like you're finally living in alignment with who you truly are.
Exactly. And they emphasize that this is an ongoing process, that there's no end point, that we're always evolving, always growing, always becoming.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment, but about embracing the journey, the ups and downs, the twists and turns.
Right. And they remind us that even in the midst of all this chaos, all this absurdity, there's still beauty, there's still joy, there's still love.
It's about finding those moments of grace, those glimpses of the divine in the everyday, in the ordinary.
And that's a pretty amazing thing, don't you think?
It is. And it's something that I think we all crave, this sense of connection, this sense of meaning, this sense of belonging.
And NSN offers a path to finding that, a path that's not always easy, but that's definitely worth taking.
So for anyone out there who's feeling lost, who's feeling stuck, who's searching for something more, I highly recommend checking out the NSN workshop. It might just change your life.
It might just blow your mind.
Until next time, keep diving deep.